break. It's now time for our 2 p.m. panel. Today we're talking about how best can traditional sports entities make waves in the esports space. So without further ado, let's kick it off.
Great, thank you. So my name is Tom Zuber. I'm the managing partner of Zuber Lawler. I'd like to thank our friends at ESI for the opportunity to speak today. We're very grateful for our friendship with ESI. Zuber Lawler, in a sentence, is a law firm that's very focused on emerging areas of industry and technology like esports, but also crypto, blockchain, metaverse, NFTs. So we've become a leader in these areas. And I guess the way I describe our firm is we're a bunch of nerds. We think a lot about what the world's going to look like 10 and 20 years from now, and we work backwards. Hence our presence in this space. We've got offices across the country, and we have a network, Zuber Lawler Global, that has over 400 independent contractor attorneys throughout the world, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to go ahead and introduce my esteemed panel, and then we're going to go ahead and get into the topic of our conversation, which is introducing traditional brands into the esports community. So why don't we go ahead and start on the end there. So we have James O'Connor, Jamie, who's with the Pittsburgh Knights. Why don't you go ahead and tell us about yourself and what you're up to these days, and we'll just move down the line.
I've been in gaming and esports for 21 years. I was a pro Counter-Strike player. I played a lot of pro seasons. I coached. And now I created the Knights, which the Steelers and the owner of the Pirates and Wiz Khalifa are partners. And we do lots of events, and we're trying to have a world-class team and brand. We're focused on Valorant and Rocket League, our two primary games, and we're doing some really cool stuff in Discord for development around tournaments. So happy to be here.
Great, thank you, Jamie. Next we have Andrew McNeil, who is with Monumental. So Andrew, you want to tell us a bit about yourself and Monumental and what you're up to?
Hi, Andrew McNeil, Senior Director of Esports at Monumental Sports and Entertainment. Monumental is probably most well-known, especially for folks who live in DC here, for our traditional sports teams brands. Washington Wizards NBA team, Washington Capitals NHL team, the 4-1 Washington Mystics WNBA team. We also own and operate Capital One Arena here in downtown DC. But we're actively involved in the esports space. We've got an investment in Team Liquid, one of the biggest endemic esports organizations in the world. And then we also have some owned and operated esports properties. So we are active in the NBA 2K League space. Wizards District Gaming was one of the inaugural teams in the 2K League. As Neil mentioned on a prior panel, we're the defending back-to-back NBA 2K League champions, which we're very proud of. We also just won the NBA 2K League's first 3-on-3 tournament this past weekend, which we're very proud of. So we're really active in the NBA 2K League space. We're also active in the NHL esports space. We've got a dedicated sub-brand called Caps Gaming under our umbrella, where we focus on initiatives in the NHL esports space. And then we are building a dedicated esports facility called District E in Gallery Place Mall, right next to Capital One Arena. It's going to be a 14,000 square foot public esports facility that will open in the fall, and we'll be hosting a number of esports events for NBA 2K League and NHL there, in addition to a number of other esports events.
Thank you, Andrew. And why don't we go to Jordan next? So Jordan is with the Islanders. Jordan?
Yep. Hi, everybody. I'm Jordan. Nice to meet you. So I found my space in the esports world, focusing on the crossover between the sports industry and the esports industry. Having experience in FIFA with the MLS, NBA 2K with the NBA 2K League, and now NHL with the New York Islanders. We recently launched an esports team called Isles GT, which is the full esports vertical for the New York Islanders. And we focus on everything from community development, partner engagement, fan retention, and a ton of different marketing activations in order to use esports to further influence the New York Islanders brand.
Thank you, Jordan. And finally, we have Ray Smith with NASCAR. Ray?
Ray Smith, NASCAR Gaming and Esports. My main focuses are what we do with our iRacing Esports series. Also, I focus on activation. So currently, right now, we're working with Allied Esports out of Las Vegas, and we're doing an 18-market tour that mirrors our NASCAR schedule of bringing out iRacing simulator rigs, 2-track. Also, we're showing off our integration with Rocket League with our brand new cars and skins that are in that game last year and this year. But we're connecting dots. We're trying to find the best wins we can in each market we go to, and just looking to how we can organically put ourselves into the conversation of esports and gaming.
Great. And this topic to me is a fascinating one. It's one thing to build an esports company from the ground up, but it's another thing to take a traditional sports brand and then to reintroduce that to what is at times not necessarily a consistent audience, right? It's got different demographics, the esports community. And NASCAR is doing that very well. So we'd love to know, how are you doing it? What is NASCAR doing to bring its brand to the esports community?
So appreciate the question. So from our core, it's what we do with the iRacing platform. That is the official simulation of NASCAR. It's an enhanced video game. iRacing takes scanners out to tracks. They scan the tracks to the smallest degree, so you get every bump, every manipulation to that track. They also scan the cars. And they work with our research and development team to make these items as accurate as possible. We host 3 series with that platform currently. One is the Coca-Cola iRacing series. That features the top 40 oval drivers in the world. They have a feeder system that they have to qualify for to be the top 40. That features a $330,000 prize pool. We also have the International Series. That features our real-life drivers that are in Europe, Canada, Mexico, and also our Drive for Diversity program that develops drivers along the way. And then finally, we introduced our College iRacing Series this semester. That performed very well for us. We had 3 races with 2-week qualifiers before the main events. We saw nearly 500 students participate, and they represented over 260 universities and colleges. And that's a growth strategy for us. That's a way for us to get our property in the colleges and universities in North America and let them embrace them and better us because we truly believe that the students and the faculty members right now at those university colleges are the experts in this area. The other half of the house at NASCAR concentrates on IP integration. So last year we had integration with Jailbreak and Roblox for I think a week or 2. Like I said, Rocket League, we have organic integration there. So those are flashes in the pan that we'll constantly work on to get to the mass population and let them interact with our brand, because we truly believe that right now gaming and esports is social media of 2008. That's where the conversation is happening, and that's where we need to be a part of that conversation. And the final piece is community growth. So we just launched a Discord server in the past year, and that's just a natural place for us to be in a conversation and to bring our assets to that community so they can interact with our driver radios, our drivers on AMA. So we're slowly and strategically trying to get smarter of how we interact with the community in an organic way.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Ray. Jamie, let's go with you next. Esports is inherently digital. So how are traditional sports organizations using events to attract traditional sports fans? How are you doing that in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, so I think that conversation comes out of basically the goal of what traditional sports teams are trying to accomplish is driving traffic to their venues, where they're getting food and beverage revenue or ticketing, merchandise sales, and overall sponsorship engagement in live events. And so I think when we're looking at that and how they're capturing data and how they're engaging a fan base, I think they are expanding into trying to say, how are they using different medium forms, like you just said, social media, right? It's a new form of social media where they're using it to engage. So they have to find a way to organically engage in a way that leads right back to their overall core, which is winning and winning in that sport. So specifically for, let's say, the Steelers, they drive participation, they drive fandom and focus on what they would say is participation in the sport. So you'd have to play football on a camp to be able to be who they would designate as going to be their most passionate fan. So how do they take that and then convert that into our larger conversation around fandom of the sport and expose more people to that so that they might want to play it? Or, not everybody has to watch the NFL to like it and to enjoy the game and learn about the game and participate in their own way. And so I think they have an issue, or not an issue, but they just want to focus in Major League Baseball too, where they want to drive people to their sport to play the sport so that they can have more great players because they have to participate there. So that's where it dovetails into, well, how does that relate to gaming? And so we spent a lot of time in that question, a lot of education on it, and what I think we have come up to is basically there's a couple different paths to pros. Gamers are passionate about what they like to do, and they need to get in front of them on multiple touch points to have as many engagements. But what they aspire to do largely in their ecosystem in different market is they want to be a pro most of the time, or have power and influence and money in the clout of being great at what they do and engaging and loving at what they do. So you have to go into those spaces and you have to support them on their journey to do what they want to do and essentially compel them to convert essentially in those spaces. So if you see Rocket League with putting a football, they've kind of converted it to an NFL field in the game. Well, you have to convert that to the love of football because Madden doesn't have the traffic there. So you kind of have to go into those spaces and educate them and continue to have them engage. And I think early stage, they're still getting their head around it, but you're seeing that they need to expand in home market areas and globally, and they need to convert that fan base. And it's a lot of work to take a camp to go to, let's say, Mexico and have a player go down there and you're reaching 15 kids. So like, how are you using, those are the conversations that we're having.
Yeah.
So I think that it dovetails to tie, what they're doing, what the kids are doing in their sport that they're passionate about, and connecting that in basically lead nurturing them to expose them with their economy of their time to be interested in other things for their entertainment. I think that's what I can tell you.
So how about in the other direction? So it's one thing, the origin of the Knights obviously is particular in the sense that you approached a football team and a baseball team and you said, let's start an esports team, right? And of course, inherently, you're going to be reaching out to esports fans by leveraging these traditional sports brands, right? Mm-hmm. But how about in the other direction? Are the Steelers interested in attracting, in bringing more people to football events and to watching football events on TV? I'm talking traditional football. Are they reaching out to esports folks? And if so, how are they converting them in the other direction?
So I think one I'll give you a small correction on. I told them I was raising money and they were welcome to join me on the journey. I am very sure. So that's first. Second, I think the goal of why, I'll just speak what I wanted, was I wanted the business intelligence of the sports franchises to understand how they commercialize, because I knew I needed to build an association of teams coming together to serve and support the interest of game developers to market and promote their game. And so I think the teams can drive the fandom and rivalry, and that's what I wanted to learn from how the traditional sports teams are driving economies of scope and scale between them, the teams, and driving real fandom and rivalry of the teams to drive fandom, to drive it more traffic back to the game. So that's what I wanted. I understand it. And then what they get for it is essentially we're able to, when we're thinking about live events, I'm jealous that you guys are building your events and your event space and stuff. I'm taking a more cautious, conservative approach where I'm saying in a couple of weeks, let's do a Rocket League tournament in the Pirates Stadium. Let's see what that looks like. Let's grow it out of there. We have a Stage AE, which is a 1,500 person venue that the Steelers own, that has music venues. They have 155 days of the year they'd like to fill because music venues are, music labels are just coming back. So, and then the Steelers Stadium, how are we driving shoulder events around what they're doing to drive traffic to people into the stadium earlier to get more food and beverage revenue and getting them, into the stadium to handle the traffic. So I think that we're using that as additional shoulder events where we have planned is doing online events to drive traffic to physical events. I'm lighter on physical events because I think gaming is traditionally done digitally in a metaverse space. And so how are we taking that fandom and driving it to physical events and partners and sponsors activations around that? So that's what I'm doing. I'm putting in those two stadiums. It'll come to our live event venue for Stage E. And eventually when the fandom grows and the consumer tells us that we're ready for more, we'll build it.
Great. So let's stay on that topic of physical spaces, event spaces. Andrew, on that note, tell us about District D. And first of all, just starting by telling the audience, if they're not familiar, what is District D, but also then, what esports events, what types of events are you planning on hosting in District D?
Yeah, so District D, as I mentioned, is a 14,000 square foot esports facility that we're opening here in downtown DC. It's going to be in the Gallery Place Mall, which is directly connected to Capital One Arena. The entrance is literally 10 steps from the north entrance of Capital One Arena. And it's primarily a public event space where 150 seats for esports events, full bar and restaurant, and then we'll have 4,000 square feet of dedicated sort of private team op space for our teams to practice, to lounge around and kind of work out of. And we're aiming to host as many esports events there as we can. Obviously, Wizards District Gaming, we've been really successful in the league, and we're in the 5th season now of the NBA 2K League, and we've literally never had a home game, which is frustrating because we are the Washington DC NBA 2K League franchise. And so, right now the 2K League's in sort of a hybrid, remote, in-person model where we play a couple weeks of remote games to qualify for sort of an in-person tournament. District D will give us a chance to play those sort of remote games in person in front of a crowd. And as James said, drive people to a venue to hopefully open up additional revenue opportunities, not obviously providing additional exposure to sponsors that we sell for our Wizards District Gaming team and also for District D itself, but then also potentially ticket sales, F&B sales, merchandise, et cetera, because, for most folks in esports, like, partnerships is like 99% of their revenue. So it helps us kind of get a start on potentially unlocking other revenue streams. And then we can obviously do more with our NHL esports brand, Caps Gaming, but also it gives us an opportunity to play in other sandboxes. I mentioned the Team Liquid investment Monumental has. So, obviously we would never sign a Monumental Rocket League team, right? Because Team Liquid has one. We wouldn't have a Monumental Esports Super Smash Brothers player because Team Liquid has multiple Smash Brothers players, including Hungrybox, one of the best ever. But there are those communities here in the DMV. Super Smash Brothers is a massive community here in the DMV. So we can now start to host events and talk to those audiences and interact with them in ways that we haven't necessarily been able to through NBA 2K or through NHL. And maybe those folks start to take a shine to Wizards District Gaming and start tuning in for games. And maybe they're never going to be NBA 2K League players, but maybe they're going to be supportive of us because of the community we've sort of helped foster in the gaming space in Washington, DC, which we're hopeful of. But the proximity to Capital One Arena also allows us to do a lot with our traditional team brands. The size of the space, 150 seats, allows us to do a lot of different esports events. We're not it's not a 2,000 seat, venue that is marketed as an esports arena, but really it's probably a concert venue with a handful of esports events a year. We're planning on doing multiple esports events throughout the year, but we can now do pre and post game activations for Caps and Wizards games. We can do some small live concerts. Ticketmaster is actually the naming rights partner of District D. So there's a lot of flexibility in that we can bring a lot of people who are not in the esports ecosystem at all and provide a little bit of exposure to them in terms of what we're doing in esports by getting them into our venue for something that's maybe not an esports event. Maybe it's a Wizards pregame activation or it's a concert, but there's esports around them in that venue, even if they're not there for that. And hopefully that will start to provide a little bit more exposure to what we're doing there with our esports properties.
Thank you, Andrew. Let's go with you, Jordan, on an open-ended question, an intentionally open-ended question. Tell us about IELTS GT.
Yeah, I think before we get into that, we should talk about why sports teams want to get into esports and what the interests are there, which will lead to how we ended up developing IELTS GT. But sports teams ultimately get into esports because they see a secondary mode of consumption for viewership. So, with traditional sports, your primary mode of consumption is going to the game first and watching the game on TV second or on a streaming platform second. But with esports, you have this digital space where natively it's the primary mode of consumption is watching on Twitch. And then if you can have in-person events, if you can have LANs, that's kind of a secondary mode that people love to go to and people love to activate at, and we see a lot of success with. But the primary mode will always be watching digitally because it's such a digital space. So the Islanders, as well as a bunch of other sports teams, see the the interest in getting into esports by accessing this digital space and having this community that gets together digitally of Islanders fans, of hockey fans, of NHL fans, and video game players, all in this one space. So we created Discords, Twitch, different social media channels, all for the brand Isles GT, which ultimately was Isles Gaming Team, developed as the esports brand of the New York Islanders. And so what we've gone and done is sign 9 competitive players that specifically play in the NHL title at this time. We probably will look to expand into other titles in the future, but the goal right now is 2 strategies. Is number 1, create our team, which allows our current fans to have players to root for and to follow along, and that accesses our current market and turns them into GT fans or gaming fans in general. And then we also host tournaments, and that's more of a national reach that is not necessarily targeted towards Islander fans, but more towards people who play the NHL video game, and bringing them into getting interested in Isles GT and ultimately converting them into New York Islanders fans. And then the other piece of it is activations we do around the arena, which always see incredible interest, whether that's us playing on the Jumbotron between periods or having activations on the concourse. Activating esports around the arena reaches that next generation of fans, which we were able to segment. And out of our Isles GT demographic, we were able to see 76% of our fans are between that 18 and 34 age range, which is really, really target demographic for a lot of these brands that want to get involved, and that next generation of fan that's going to buy tickets and merch and food and beverage at the arena. So we found a really great way to target that audience.
Thank you, Jordan. And Jordan, let's stay with you for a moment, just on a more general question, but this is open for the panel. Tell us about what's going on now as far as the current level of integration and engagement in esports by traditional sports entities. So what are your frustrations, if any? What are folks, examples of folks doing it right, shortcomings and places where there are opportunities to fill gaps in terms of leveraging traditional sports brands? What are your thoughts in that area?
Yeah, I would say the biggest frustration with traditional sports that you don't get in more of the endemic sports is the product itself. A lot of people are like, why would I watch somebody play this digitally when I can watch the actual players play in real life? So that's something we're trying to solve by creating personalities and creating engagements between our players and the fans themselves, because they need a reason to want to watch our live streams rather than, or not necessarily rather than, but in addition to watching Islanders games. And I think all of esports, traditional, these esports entities are facing the same problem. The other, and I would say main issue, is dealing with the publishers, is that we don't have the same support from the publishers that some of the more endemic sports have. They are not as focused on the competitive side and the esports side of things, like adding spectator mode or allowing players to get back into their lobbies. They're really just focused on selling copies of the game and having in-game rewards, whether that's Ultimate Team or other game modes.
So it's interesting because one of the things that's most attractive about esports, that makes esports is the fact that anybody can be LeBron James, right? You don't have to be 7 feet tall. You don't have to be able to move down the court at a particular pace and so on and so forth. But at the same time, that's what, in a sense, at least on the surface of things, would make watching esports less exciting than watching the actual real LeBron James, because only a few people can do that. So it's really a process of taking what's unique about esports and making that an attraction point and saying that you should watch it because this is you. You could be, and so navigating that is a tough thing.
Yep.
So any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I will say that's also, I think, for traditional sports titles as esports, I think that's also a bit of a problem that we face is, in traditional sports, there are so many levels that you advance through to get to the point where you're a professional, right? Like Bradley Beal, everyone knows Bradley Beal is really good because obviously he was the best player in his AAU team, he was the best player in his high school team, he was best player in his college team, and got to the NBA. Over the course of that career, like the player pool that he was a part of got weeded out over time. In esports, there is not that sort of pipeline, that path to pro, that long process. It's, you play for a couple of years, you win some tournaments, and you find yourself sort of almost like a couple years later on an esports team. So that now, like, everyone who plays, who watches, as an example, NBA 2K League, who also plays 2K thinks they're good enough to be in the league. And so they don't see the players that are on TV, or excuse me, on Twitch, in these tournaments as the best NBA 2K players in the world.
Right.
They're just like, oh, my 7'3" center could do that. And it's like, no, you couldn't. If you played against our guys, you'd get flooded and you'd quit out in the second half because they're that good. But they just don't understand that because they have not gone through that process of advancing those levels because there's not that pipeline there. So that's kind of one of the things that I've had in the back of my mind for 2 years is like, how do we convince people that the players on our team and the players in the NBA 2K League, or the competitive players in the NHL GWC, are the best NHL esports or the best NBA 2K players in the world? Because right now, like, the larger game, that population of that game doesn't see it that way because they think, oh, I can do that because I do that at home, but it's not the same.
Go ahead, Jamie.
What you just said is really important. So if you want to key in on what he said, so when I used to play competitively in Counter-Strike, if you started in open and then you beat everybody, then you went to main or advanced, and then you beat everyone, they all become your fans. And they also know who the good people are. But if you're just doing a circuit in a tournament where you basically you almost convert fans through the path to pro model where they, like you just said, you just gave the example. So that is the issue. That's very astute. So I think the question is how with NBA 2K or NHL or Madden or the others, how are they clearly driving a path to pro model to those things where you're engaging with content and you're really highlighting those people and you're telling their stories like you just told the one player's story. I think that's the key.
And to jump on that, I would say we've talked a lot about NBA and NHL, but a league that's doing it really well is the MLS. I think that they're highlighting their players, and people aren't thinking, oh, I could beat these players, because they're opening up a lot of different tournaments and a lot of opportunities for casual players to play against these guys. And we're seeing that a lot of the pro players in the MLS are out in the community and really recognizable and playing in mass tournaments all over the world, and not just only playing against other EMLS players. So I think getting that access for the casual player to actually play against some of these pros is where they realize how good these guys really are.
Right. Let's talk about Carruth, Raja Carruth. So he starts sim racing at the age of 12, and now he's on developmental circuits. Ray, how is eNASCAR, iRacing, how are you using that? How is NASCAR using that to identify traditional racing talent?
Yeah, so Raja Carruth is one of our unique highlighted stories. So as you said, at 12, he saw cars, and he got into NASCAR. He was like, oh, this is cool, I love NASCAR. So he's from Northwest DC. Richmond Raceway is 2 hours south of him. Dover Motor Speedway is 2 hours east of here. So he started going to the tracks with his dad. And he was, he's of an age, he's 19 now, he's of an age where he grew up where social media was always in his hands, YouTube was always in his hands. So as he grew, he was playing the NASCAR console games. He was getting into it, he was watching it every weekend. And then about 4 years ago, he started his iRacing membership. From what I heard, he took his school MacBook and split the hard drive in half. Against his mother's better judgment, and started iRacing from there. When you look at Raja right now, he raced this past weekend at Kansas Speedway in our ARCA series. That's basically AA ball for NASCAR. He also races part-time in our AAA ball, stay with baseball analogies, AAA ball for Xfinity. So quickly, he started his iRacing membership. He proved himself as a content creator, as someone who was committed to the game. He was quickly recognized by NASCAR and brought into the Drive for Diversity program through Legends Cars, which is a smaller version car that races on a smaller track. He was brought into the program that's down in Charlotte. He did some more development. He was on Space Station Gaming. He was a content creator for them, continued his growth, did part-time ARCA last year, didn't tear up his car, finished well. Went full-time ARCA this year, part-time Xfinity. So like we talk about it often, like in 10 years, we're going to look at the NASCAR grid, and we're going to say half this field came from esports. because now our talent pool got bigger, because you don't need Uncle Johnny who can fix your car. You don't need family money to buy a car, pay to get into the racetrack. Like now all you need to do is pay $13 a month for your iRacing membership and get all the equipment. So Raja is a unique story. I mean, William Byron, same thing. His dad made him prove himself on iRacing before he paid for him to get into Legends. And now he races the 24 Jeff Gordon car. I mean, we're seeing it left and right. It's not just Raja, but we're going to double down on that development. And because once we do that, our talent pool gets bigger, and the inventory that our sponsors can get into is bigger. So Raja's proving the point for us right now, and we're excited about the future.
Thanks, Ray. Jamie, I'm an IP attorney, so I get excited about brands and the logistical challenges of bringing brands in older industries into these newer industries like esports, and also the legal challenge of actually owning that IP as it crosses those thresholds. So let's talk about the Steelers, the Pirates, Wiz Khalifa, Evgeny Malkin, the NHL star. How are you incorporating those brands, those personal brands, those team brands, those traditional brands into your esports events, digital and other?
So right now, it's about basically taking a brand collaboration. It just starts with trying to tell the story of what they're doing and why they're great at what they do, and then finding a connection within what we do that they're passionate about. So one of the reasons why it's still in the works, but Evgeny Malkin is a big Counter-Strike fan. And so he's actually a fan of Simple. Simple's from the Ukraine, and he's from that area. And I coached Simple to top 4 in the world. So my point is there's a direct connection with a fandom of a person in a game. So I think telling that story about Evgeny Malkin likes Counter-Strike is an example. That's how our connection came through that. And then you go to Wiz, and something I'm really passionate about. It's an idea that's not public. I just brainstormed it. We went out to an event, but I really realized that the majority of music artists really connect through fighting games. And so it's something easy for them to connect to. A lot of celebrity talent doesn't have a lot of time they're great at what they do. They're not great at gaming. And so what you have to do is you have to find a way for them to really take the pressure off it. Just an example, we had like Terrell Edmond play against our Madden player or something, and he went, that was like 70-0. It was just not, it's just like, you just can't compete. So how do you make those people who really want to take their fandom and connect in gaming? And I think what we have is, essentially is a tournament series that we're doing within Discord, where each talent, whoever it is, has a ladder to them where they kind of get to have an association with that person, and then they almost have, a supporter, cheerleader, hype man or woman really supporting the person that they're picking, and having those people compete, and they can celebrate something and possibly play with them for a charity event. So that's what we're thinking. So that's how we're thinking. It's really taking, and it takes a lot of time to think creatively on the activation of how you're going to take, because really it's really important to understand there's 2 sections. There's a kid that wants to be a great Madden player, NHL player, NBA 2K player, and then there's an artist that, or another group like NASCAR that really is, NASCAR is the best drivers in sport. So you have to take those 2 path to pro models and create as much integration and synergy of those people aspiring to go in those paths, and really try to, convert some of them to those engagements. So I think that's what we're thinking about, and how you take the relevancy of those audiences and pair them together. So I think then you can tie stories and you can tie extra, merch and stuff and all.
How about in the other direction, Jamie? So talking now, going from esports, fishing in traditional sports environments for new esports clients, so customers. So how are you exposing the Knights brand to Steelers fans and to Pirates fans?
That's a great question. So we did it during the games prior to COVID as a test. We did like a gaming zone in the Steelers stadium, and so we we didn't market it. We just want to see what would happen with it. And it was full during halftime, but during the game, obviously people are watching the game, you know. So what I think we're going to move to, because the Steelers are, you know, sell out every game, and it's pretty intense in the stadium during the game. So it's more of a shoulder event tied to it. And what we did, where we really connected the kids, because a lot of the parents may not bring their kids to a Steeler game, is that it's really around like draft day, because they do a lot of kids engagement events during that. So there's like throw the football, jump on a blowout or something. There's all these so that's where we saw a lot of the kids come out, and they were really attracted to what we did. And so we flew in, it was like a couple weeks ago, we flew in our Madden player that had won the Steelers championship. And then we took the Steelers players and they played Madden. The Steelers are getting more comfortable with things outside of Madden, but just in that space. And we had new console setups and we had some competitions there. So it was really light, just fan engagement, just exposing them to who the Knights are and lead nurturing them to other opportunities and tournaments like a Valorant tournament or something like that. We would tell the story. Yeah. So we really need to tell them who we are, what we're about, and what there is, and their first exposure is really probably makes sense in the Steelers stadium early on during a Steelers game or an event. It's probably something that was focused on them, which is Madden. And then that's when you're telling them about other things we're doing and kind of converting outside of that.
Thanks, Jamie. Andrew, the Wizards 2K team, what are your metrics for success with your esports team, and how significant are those revenues, the 2K revenues, as compared to the other team brands in your portfolio today? And then what do you think 5 years from now? How is that going to evolve?
Yeah, I mean, the way we kind of measure our success, I mean, first and foremost is championships, and luckily we've been able to do that the last couple of years, and so that's been awesome. You know, the other revenue, you know, just driving partnership revenue as much as we can. It's a drop in the bucket compared to the Capitals and Wizards and some of our major team brands. But I mean, luckily we're not reliant upon our esports properties to drive that revenue for us as an organization yet. So I mean, I think we see continued growth, you know, from our esports properties. We see continued expansion. You know, we see a ton of opportunity for those owned and operated teams to grow, but also for the collaboration between our sort of traditional or our major team brands with our esports properties to help amplify each other in a lot of ways.
Can you give us a hint? Okay, I'm getting the hook here. So I'm going to have one follow-up question, though, for you, Andrew. Mm-hmm. Can you give us a hint of what you expect that ratio to look like, as specific as you feel comfortable getting 5 years from now? So it's a drop in the bucket today, but where do you expect to be 5 years from now? Percentage would be great if you feel so bold.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of our sort of overall revenues, I'm not sure, but in terms of where we're at now versus where we kind of see ourselves in 5 years in terms of esports revenue, I mean, I think we see it, you know, something close to 5x what we're at right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. So I think that's it. Do we have time for questions here or no? Well, I'm going to assume that's yes. No, we don't. All right. So I just got the hook here. I want to thank my panelists. Just obviously, it's a stellar panel here, and I'm excited just to be a part of the conversation. And thank all of you for listening. Really appreciate it. And thanks again to ESI, our friends there, Sam and David and everyone else. We greatly appreciate the opportunity to speak. Thank you very much.